This was a requested video, and I'm gonna give it to you.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up! It's time to look at the enemy. Look in the mirror if he is no friend to me.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Pitch This here on the MrEliMac channel. I'm your host, MrEliMac, and today I'm going to be doing a video that was actually requested in the comments of my What If the Arrowverse was Marvel. I can't remember which part exactly, but this was requested, and it was basically just swapping out the Spider-Man movies, the Sony Spider-Man movies, for a DC character. And I had a few ideas for that. Like, the first thought I had was, oh, I'll just make them Superman movies. I'll just switch that out. But then I realized something I did all the way back with the What If the MCU was the DCCU. I realized the thing I did there, and I thought to myself, well, I can't really make those Spider-Man movies Superman anymore, mainly because of what I did for the Spider-Man analog in this version of the DCCU. So because of that, I am making all of these early Spider-Man movies Captain Marvel Shazam based, and that was very difficult when looking at all these movies, and especially the original Spider-Man trilogy and the Amazing Spider-Man duology, and being like, oh, how am I going to make this Captain Marvel and Shazam based? And then I look back at the original idea I had with Shazam and the Seven Magic Lands, which was very much the Spider-Man No Way Home analog, which dealt with a multiverse. And so I was like, okay, who are the characters I introduced in that, and how can I make them work here? And so very much trying to work retroactively with these. So yeah, I'm gonna apologize right now if they're not 100% great, because it was very much me struggling with this. Also, the person requested of doing the X-Men in DC. I have somewhat of an idea for what I would do for the X-Men universe, for the Fox X-Men universe, but right now I don't have the greatest full-on plot thread right now for what I would do with those movies. So just know that there is something that I'm working on with that, and I will eventually, hopefully, get a video out on what I would do for the Fox X-Men. But until I get to that point, and before I actually get into the full idea of what I would do for this, please make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. That way you can be up to date with all the videos I have here on the channel. Also, hit the notification bell. That way you can be notified whenever a new video like this comes your way. But with all the preamble out of the way, let's actually get into it, because I wanted to go ahead and get this out of the way. I'm not going to do all of the Sony Spider-Verse stuff. Like, the movies I'm not touching are the Venom trilogy, because the third one's about to come out. I'm not touching Venom. I'm not touching Morbius. I'm not touching the two Spider-Verse movies. I'm not doing any of those. Like, anything that was announced for Sony's Spider-Man movie universe, all of that stuff, I'm not touching, because that would be me having to go deep into all of the Shazam lore, and I don't know enough about Shazam to do a full breakdown of all of this. Plus, with some of the stuff I'm doing in the What If the MCU was the DCCU, I'm already taking a little bit of what the Shazam universe is doing. Like, for example, instead of doing the Loki show, I'm making it Black Adam. So I'm already having to do that. I'm already working with all of that, so we already sort of have an establishment of what some of the Shazam universe is going to be looking like in the future. So for this video, I'm only going to be talking about the movie analogs to the original Raimi trilogy and the Andrew Garfield duology. I'm only touching those because those were very much the easier ones to look at. And so let's get into the first half of this, which is very much the original Raimi trilogy, Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man 2, and Spider-Man 3. And I very much want to establish sort of the setting in the world, because the way I was putting these all together, I was sort of putting them in blocks, where the DCCU version of Shazam that we're getting in, with Shazam and the power of Shazam and Shazam and the Seven Magic Lands, where he's interacting with all the other superheroes. That's more of the modern interpretation of this character, like with him being with the foster family and the foster kids also being Shazam heroes and all that stuff. That is over there in the modern interpretation of the Shazam run. And so when I was looking at that and establishing that, I was like, okay, what are sort of the runs that I want these to be? Because after establishing that was the modern run of the comics, I decided, okay, I'm going to have the ones that would be the Raimi trilogies and the ones that would be the Garfield duology. I want them to feel separate, like they're different runs as well. So I'm establishing that the Raimi trilogy is based off of the original Golden Age run of Captain Marvel, and I'll get deeper into that when I talk about each of the films. But those movies are very much going to be based off of the Golden Age of the character, and especially not only that, they're going to be set in the 1940s. I'm just going to go ahead and have those be set in the 1940s because that's when the character debuted, and that's when a lot of the stuff that we know, or some of the stuff that we know about Billy Batson and Shazam, those really come in during the 1940s. And so I wanted to very much establish, like, this Raimi trilogy is the 1940s. Now, when I look at the Andrew Garfield stuff, I wanted to sort of have that be more based off of the 90s run of the comics. Like, when Shazam is first brought into the original DC universe, I wanted that to sort of be the 90s run with some hints of his run in the 70s. Sort of like sprinkling around like the sort of silver bronze age to modern age-ish, like original modern age-ish, into this duology. And again, with the stuff in the DCCU, that is the current run, that's more of the modern interpretations of the character, where it's early modern age, more Bronze Age for the duology. So with that parameters out of the way, we get a good idea of where we're setting each of them. And if you didn't, I don't remember if I mentioned this at all during the original, when I was talking about Shazam and the Seven Magic Lands, about the multiverse stuff, but the Raimi trilogy will be set on Earth 5. Like, when we're watching the interpretation in the movie, that is Earth 5, which is very much based off of Earth S, which is the original Shazam Earth. That's the original Shazam Earth, and even when you go through Multiversity, that is the Shazam-verse, Earth 5, and that's sort of the Thunder World, like the more happy-go-lucky characters, the ones that are more inspired by the Golden Age of Shazam. That is very much what the Raimi trilogy is going to be based off of, or that's the Earth that is set in. Whereas the duology, the ones that are set more in the Bronze Age to early modern age, like the more 90s grittier era, is set in Earth 22. And in Multiversity and in the DC Comics multiverse, Earth 22 is the Kingdom Come era of Captain Marvel, Shazam. And I just feel like that's a great way to look at how we establish both. Like, Earth 5 is more of the golden, brighter age and more of that era, and the duology is more Earth 22, where it's darker and it's a bit grittier, and that's sort of what they were trying to do with Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man when they first spun it out. And now we're sort of, the DCCU is more of the Prime Earth, New Earth era of all of this. And so I just wanted to very much establish where we're looking at it in terms of, hey, this is sort of the Earths. This is sort of the way we're going to be looking at them. So let's go into the Raimi trilogy, where the first one is Spider-Man, and I'm calling it Captain Marvel, because in my head, this is sort of, the character isn't known as Shazam. He is known as Captain Marvel in the Golden Age, and so I'm just starting it out that way. And the characters that we would be seeing are Billy Batson, and we would see the origin story. Like, we're seeing multiple interpretations of the origin story, maybe. But Billy Batson as Captain Marvel, he is the main protagonist, and the main love interest, sort of the Mary Jane analog, is Sissy Summerlee, who was Billy's girlfriend in the golden age of comics. She's a character that really hasn't been brought back since the golden age of Shazam, and so because this is more based off of the golden age, I thought, oh, it seems to make sense that Sissy Summerly would be sort of the main love interest and all that. Freddie Freeman would be one of the main supporting characters, with Mary Bromfield being another major supporting character. But in this film, we would also get the reveal that Mary Bromfield is actually Mary Batson, like the twin sister of Billy Batson, because that was a major plot point in the golden age of Captain Marvel, and I would want to establish that. And we would just get the reveal in this movie. I wouldn't want to drag it out for 3 films. That would be a hint, and then we'd be like, oh, by the way, you two are brother and sister. And so that's sort of establishing the main trio friendship of Billy, Freddie, and Mary. Dudley H. Dudley would be in this film as well, and that's Uncle Dudley. He would be sort of the main caretaker for Billy and Freddie and Mary, and he would be sort of the fatherly figure. He'd be like the Aunt May figure in this film, for lack of a better term, the one taking care of our heroes. And then we would have Sterling Morris in the film, sort of serving as Billy's boss for the radio station, and also serving as my J. Jonah Jameson analog. We would get the Wizard in this as well, serving as like, oh, we're showing you how he gets his powers. We're just more based off of the Golden Age version. But the main antagonist, sort of serving as the Green Goblin analog, would be Albrecht Krieger, aka Captain Nazi. Because again, this is set in the 1940s, and also during this time period of 2002, we're a little bit less afraid of mentioning Nazis in comic book movies. I say that because, sure, they mention Nazis in Captain America the First Avenger, but they didn't really full on say, oh, they are the main antagonists. Instead, they put in a proxy for the Nazis in Hydra. And so ever since then, sort of Hydra has been used in Marvel context as these are the Nazis of the Marvel Universe, instead of just making Nazis the Nazis of the Marvel Universe. They've just made it Hydra. So we're back into this era of, yeah, we're going to establish that Nazis are bad guys. And we're using Captain Nazi as sort of the main antagonist to Captain Marvel, sort of serving as the evil version. And Captain Marvel very much, though it is set in the 40s and World War II is happening, and we're establishing that Captain Marvel is more serving as the Captain Nazi is serving as the super person that is going to invade America, and so Captain Marvel is serving as that deterrent to Captain Nazi. And we get a big fighting Captain Marvel saves the day. Captain Nazi is killed in the film, and it's very much, this movie is serving as an origin story, while also like serving as this is Captain Marvel's first adventure, first major threat. Like throughout the film, I would have him beating bad guys like criminals, like normal everyday thugs, but then like when Captain Nazi comes around, because the fear of Nazism and wanting to be Nazis is high, Captain Marvel is being like, oh, this is going to be my way. And because he's a kid, he's like, I'm gonna save the day. But that's when him meeting with Captain Nazi and fighting Captain Nazi is going like, oh, this is going to be a lot harder than I thought. And so that's with him getting the realization of, oh, being a superhero is a little bit harder than I thought. Maybe I shouldn't be a hero. But then it's sort of Freddie and Mary being the ones that are sort of helping him push through this. And yeah, that's the basic overall premise of what Captain Marvel would be. And then we move on to Spider-Man, the Spider-Man 2 analog, which is Captain Marvel 2, Billy Batson returning as Captain Marvel, Sissy Summerly returning as the main love interest, Freddie Freeman's there, Mary, now fully going by Mary Batson, is still there as a supporting character, Dudley is still there, Uncle Dudley is still there, Sterling Morris is still there. But I also wanted to introduce our Kirk Connors analog, who is Professor Edgewise, who in the comics, in the golden age of comics, Professor Edgewise is someone that was very much the mad scientist that was helping Captain Marvel go through all of his deeds and helping him with all these threats. And I wanted to very much establish a Kirk Connors character in this trilogy, because Kirk Connors was a major character for Billy, or for Peter in Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3, and so I wanted to give Billy that analog. And so for the main antagonist, because Dr. Octavius, or Doc Ock, was very much more of a sympathetic villain and someone that got to have sort of a redemption arc in the film, I wanted to look at someone from the rogues gallery of the Golden Age version of Captain Marvel and be like, okay, this may not be a sympathetic character, but we could probably give him a redemption arc in this film. And the person I saw was Oggar, Oggar, and he was someone that was sort of an apprentice of the wizard and someone that was considered the mightiest immortal in the world. And so I wanted to establish that Billy and Captain Marvel, or Captain Marvel and Oggar, had sort of like a relationship with that. And Oggar was just someone that was sort of pushed away by the wizard. And in the comics, it was because Oggar got greedy and wanted more power and was more power hungry. In this interpretation of Oggar, I would want it to be like where it seemed like he was power hungry and he wanted more power, when really it was just he wanted to help people. And it's just the wizard and all the other members of the Wizard's Council, which were mainly just, when you say Shazam, it was mainly just all the people whose letters matched with that. And it was just them wanting to, they were afraid of Oggar, and so they wanted to push Oggar out, but Oggar was not really someone that was trying to do malicious stuff. He wasn't trying to be a villainous person, but it's just they misinterpreted that. And because of that, Captain Marvel is able to find the sympathetic side of Oggar and was able to save him from fully going evil. But ultimately Oggar, because he realized he went a little too far, he would find a way to stop the evil threat that he had and save the world before anything could really be destroyed. And he would not die a monster, to quote Doc Ock in Spider-Man 2. And also I would have Sissy Summerlee discover that Billy Batson is Captain Marvel to firmly establish the Spider-Man 2 analog of the relationship between Mary Jane and Peter Parker. And also Freddy and Mary would start developing powers because of some events that happened because of what Oggar was able to do. And so yeah, that's the basic premise for Captain Marvel 2. And then we move on to the final installment of the original Raimi trilogy, the Spider-Man 3 analog, Captain Marvel 3. And we see Billy Batson return as Captain Marvel. He continues his relationship with Sissy Summerlee. Freddie Freeman returns, but this time as Captain Marvel Jr. Mary Batson returns, but now she's Mary Marvel. We get Dudley H. Dudley returning as one of the main supporting characters. Sterling Morris returns, Professor Edgewise returns, and another supporting character that debuts is Mr. Takitani. And he is someone that sort of serves as a person that is looked at as the voice of the wizard now that the wizard is fully gone and like all the connections to the wizard is gone. He sort of serves as that voice that helps Billy, and it is full on tiger in a suit. I wouldn't want to make it a tiger that can talk or a shape-shifting tiger. No, it is tiger in suit. He is full on all of that because that was Golden Age. That was the Golden Age version of Takitani, and so I decided to continue with that. But the main antagonist of this film, sort of serving as the Shazam analog, would be King Kull. And King Kull is a character that is a prehistoric warlord, sort of. But in my interpretation, that I would change up his backstory. He was not a warlord in this. Instead, he was a prehistoric king that wanted to protect his people. It's just that there is another person in his tribe that treated him and showed him as trying to be a warlord and tried to usurp him and showed him as a ruthless being. And so his entire tribe turned their back on him and he got sealed up somewhere. And now he is returning and he's just trying to release all of his rage that he has towards his people after being betrayed. Even though he would show us, like, I'm not a horrible human being. I just want revenge on the people that betrayed me. But then we would get the Venom analog. And I know I'm skipping out Harry Osborn, New Goblin. The only person that would be like that is Freddie Freeman, Captain Marvel Jr. It's just now that he has the power, he's gotten a little... He's like, oh, I can do anything. I have the power now. And it's just marrying and Billy trying to calm Freddy down. But that's the most with his subplot. But then the Venom analog would be Sabak, who would be Tim Carnes. And that is the Golden Age version of Sabak, not the version of Sabak that we got in Black Adam, not that version, but this version of Tim Carnes, where he is someone that I would interpret as that works at the same radio station as Billy, but he's an older he is like a grown-up, and he's like, this kid should not be doing a job that I should be doing. And so he tries to get Billy to abandon that, and then Tim Carnes discovers the crown of Sabak and discovers the evil power, and that's when he becomes sort of like evil version of Captain Marvel. And he tries to convince King Cole to do his bidding, and that's how we get all that. And Billy, Captain Marvel Jr., and Mary Marvel all team up to take out King Cole and Sabak. King Cole is ultimately decides to go back into his stasis state. That way he can live out the remainders of his days thinking that he was not a horrible human being, because midway through the fight he'd be like, I don't want this fight. I never wanted this fight. And it's really Mary and Freddy that convinced King Cole to put down arms, and King Cole's like, I'm not a warlord. I'm not ruthless. And if I continue doing all this, I am just proving the people from my time right. And so he leaves, but ultimately it's Billy and Sabak having this big brawl, and Sabak getting like destroyed, for the lack of a better term. And yeah, that would be basically Captain Marvel 3. I don't really have more in-depth plots with all these. I just have like reference points of what I would do for these. And so yeah, these are sort of what I would do with the Raimi trilogy of Captain Marvel films. And now we move on to the Andrew Garfield duology of Amazing Spider-Man, which, instead of it being called The Amazing Spider-Man, I would call it The Champion of Shazam. And for this one, in this much, we wouldn't get the same origin. I would change up the origin of Shazam, where he gets his powers through different means, of sort of like how Black Adam, his Shazam name is something completely different. I would have that sort of be the same with Billy. I would have Shazam come from different gods to sort of show difference between the Captain Marvel that we got in the Raimi trilogy and in this interpretation. But Billy Batson would still be Shazam. His main love interest in this time, instead of it being Sissy Summerlee, it is Deanna Barr, who in the 90s run of the comics was someone that was introduced as a supporting character mainly just for 6 issues, but I decided to extend her run in this universe with being the love interest of Billy Batson. A major supporting character that we would have would be Jim Barr, who is Deanna Barr's dad. And also in the comics, Jim Barr is the superhero known as Bullet Man. Now, would I touch on his time as Bullet Man? No, I wouldn't. I would just establish, like, oh yeah, he is someone that was a superhero in the comics. Two other characters that I would have in this movie are Cece Batson and Marilyn Batson, who are the parents of Billy Batson. And because the Amazing Spider-Man duology was so focused on Peter's parents, I would have that be a major focus as well. Even though a lot of people didn't like it, we're focusing on that here. And another major supporting character would be Susan Kent Barr, who in the comics was also Bullet Girl and is the wife of Jim Barr and the mother of Deanna Barr. And so they would be major supporting characters. Ultimately, Jim would be killed by the main antagonist. But I wanted to sort of give you an idea, because it was trying to set up like the Sinister Six and like this evil threat of Oscorp. I wanted to give you a background threat as well. And so the background threat is the 7 deadly enemies of men, which are just the 7 deadly sins. And so that's basically who are the background threats. And this, controlling all the evil that is happening. All the main antagonists are being controlled by them. Also, Uncle Dudley is returning as sort of the major recurring character and the main force behind Billy getting raised, because in this interpretation I'm still having Billy be teenage age, sort of like how I have with the DCCU version of Billy. I'm having him be a teenager here, but he still needs someone to look after him. But the main antagonist is a character known as Mr. Adam, and Mr. Adam in the comics is a robot, and he was created by a character named Dr. Charles Langley. However, for this interpretation, when I'm changing the character a bit. I would have Dr. Charles Langley be a scientist that is dying, and so he creates this robot. and the robot is just doing stuff to take out things that were connected to Dr. Langley, like the corporation that he works for, the science that he works with. But near the end, he just puts his brain and his consciousness into Mr. Atom. That way, when we get the final fight between Billy and Mr. Atom, it's like actually Dr. Charles Langley fighting Shazam. And yeah, that would be it. He would beat Mr. Atom. Mr. Atom would actually explode and be like, oh, that's the end of Dr. Charles Langley, and that threat's done. Jim Barr would die. CC Batson and Marilyn Batson are already dead in this version, and it's just, I'm trying my hardest to make this connect in some way to what the Amazing Spider-Man did. But yeah, that would be the Champion of Shazam for the first bit of the duology. And the final film I'm going to be talking about is the the Amazing Spider-Man 2 analog, which I would call the Champion of Shazam 2. And it would be Billy Batson returning as Shazam, Deanna Barr would return, CC Batson and Marilyn Batson would return, and Uncle Dudley would also return. 7 Deadly Enemies of Men would still serve as the main background antagonist, but sort of the Electro analog would be a character known as Chain Lightning, who was a recurring threat in the 70s and the early 90s. It's a female character that has electricity powers like Electro. However, because I already had the characters of Mr. Atom, Sabak, King Cole, Ogar, and Captain Nazi established as characters that would be in the DCCU villain team run by Mr. Mind. She's a character that would not go over to the DCCU because I was very much going with the Monster Society of Evil in that team, and she wasn't a part of it, and I didn't even think she was a real character until I was doing work on this. So she is one of the main antagonists, but the real main antagonists, like the main threats of this film, are Blaze and Satanis, and their characters spoken about before as sort of being the main antagonists of Black Adam in my Black Adam pitch. You can go check that video out. And they are just sort of serving as the main antagonists in this. They are, like, after Chain Lightning is defeated, it's Billy having to fight Blaze and Satanis, and he's able to get the upper hand with them. However, they ultimately kill Deanna Barr, and it's Billy basically sending them back to hell, for lack of a better term, and him feeling this depression state. However, he knows, and he realized that he needs to continue being the hero that he is, known as Shazam. And that is the basic pitches of replacing the Sony Spider-Man movies with Shazam, mainly because of Shazam being my Spider-Man analog in What If the MCU was the DCCU. It was a little difficult trying to put this all together because I'm not a big Shazam fan. He's not one of my favorite heroes. I don't know a lot about Shazam, but doing all this research really did help me have an appreciation for the character, and especially it made me want to look back. It made me look through his golden age and his 70s and 80s and 90s era and go, wow, this character has been through a lot of stuff. And it's so interesting to see sort of the evolution of the character from the golden age. It's really interesting just to see the change of the character through the different ages and through the different eras of the characters. But with all that being said, what were your thoughts on this pitch? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Were you indifferent to it? Whatever your thoughts, post them in the comments down below. And also, again, don't forget to comment what you would like me to do a pitch on. I've gotten a few requests, and I'm still working on how to do some of them because there are some pitches out there that I've been asked to do that I'm like, I don't know this character well enough, but I'll give it a shot. And so yeah, I really want to try to get a lot of requests, and trust me, it really does help me also. And please hit the like button if you like this video, and also hit the subscribe button, that way you can be up to date with all the videos I have here on the channel. Also hit the notification bell, that way you can be notified whenever a new video like this comes your way. But until next time, I've been Mr. EliMac, you have been the audience, and I hope you all have a great rest of the day.